Okay, this is the video to show you um, uh, the data that we collected from all 3 nights. So to look at where the themes are across the everybody's data. So this is what we would be looking at to do district level goals. So the first thing, and only those that were in the group where Monica was, did we have an actual time log. So what I'd ask was that if you're working as practicing counselor, which Monica is the only one to keep the time log. So your time log is an example of what we call process data. So if you've not looked at that file, that you the file is in the module, so you can look at it. Um, Take a look at that, and what it does is you log your time in different categories, and then it tells you what your percentages are. So we have an elementary counselor time log. Now, those of you who are on the night um, that Monica presented this know that she didn't record her time in the appropriate places because we haven't covered that portion. We haven't covered the delivery system yet. So she didn't understand what some of these were. So she'll understand that better later on. So let me give you the example of that. For individual planning, she thought that that was her time in that she spent planning for guidance lessons or small groups or anything like that. That type of planning is actually system support. Individual planning is working with individual students on planning for, um, basically, it's planning for the future. You don't do a whole lot of that with elementary. Typically, that happens with elementary when you're moving from elementary to middle school and you're doing your course selection stuff. But it can be, goal setting for the future. It can be career development, going over interest inventories. It can be college research type stuff. Um, Her guidance curriculum also, she was looking at that she thought that was small group. Remember, guidance curriculum is what you deliver to all students. So if you're doing small groups, those are going to be in responsive services because those students have been identified as needing more. So here's her actual time spent, and let's just pretend this is accurate data. So she spent 4% of her time in guidance curriculum, 24% in individual planning, 36% in responsive services, 20% in system support, and 16 in non-counseling duties. Now I'm going to jump over here to this document right now. This shows you, and this is in the model, this shows you the difference for different grade levels. So you see here that just look at system support, 10 to 15% for elementary and middle, and then it jumps to 15 to 20% for high school. And some of that may be related to some of the activities that you would do for high school, such as perhaps college night. You have more like PSAT testing, those types of things. Um, when you look at individual planning, from elementary, it's the smallest percentage of your time. Middle school, it goes up, and high school, it's the largest because that's really where you need to be working with those students individually because their needs become more individualized. And conversely, you see that guidance curriculum, you spend the most of your time in elementary doing that, then it decreases in middle school and decreases in high school. And responsive services are more, they're about equal at elementary and middle, 30 to 40%. And hopefully by the time we get to high school, we don't need quite as much time spent in responsive services. And look out here for all of these non-counseling related activities, 0%. It's how much time we want to spend in that. So when we look at this process data here, we see that we need some improvements. This is a great thing to utilize with your principals to help them to see maybe how some roles and responsibilities needed to be shifted. So, in looking at this, and this is these, I wrote 3 goals based upon this. Okay, our biggest issue with this is classroom guidance. So, counselors will create a classroom guidance schedule that reaches all students at least once every 6 weeks. So we've got very specific goals. They're measurable. Can we see a classroom guidance schedule? We should be able to. They're achievable, they're reasonable, and they're time limited. We want it happening every 6 weeks. Okay, the other thing that I would look at, and we'll talk about some more of these things as we move through the study of the model. But an annual calendar is a very, very important planning tool, because if you don't have an annual calendar that you've already kind of thought through and planned through the activities that you're going to do through the year, you end up spending a tremendous amount of time just in responsive services. It's really easy to just respond to whatever presents itself during the day. So an annual calendar kind of keeps you on track of, oh yeah, in 3 weeks I'm supposed to be doing this. I'm supposed to be starting small group uh, counseling sessions. And so I need to get busy with the process of setting those up. When you have that annual calendar, that let's say that we're going to start small group counseling in at the beginning of the second 6 weeks, or um, maybe they're going to begin in the middle of the second 6 weeks. So at the beginning of the second 6 weeks, you're going to need to do the activities of reaching out to teachers to get recommendations for who needs small group counseling. Then the next week you may be sending out parent permission forms for that, so that you're giving yourself the lead time to plan for those things. So we have a goal for all counselors in the district that prior to the beginning of the academic year, counselors will develop an annual calendar with target dates for implementation of counseling activities. Okay, so we know who's going to do it. We know what they're going to do. It's measurable. We can see the annual calendar. We have proof of it. And the time part of it is prior to the beginning of the academic year. This last one came out really the first night, but there was some perception data that lended itself to doing this as well from the other 2 nights. So counselors will develop marketing materials with information about the comprehensive school counseling program, and I'll make it. Let me add that and make it available. Oh no, I'm sorry, I'm reading that wrong. Okay, about the counseling program and available counseling services, and distribute to teachers and parents no later than the end of the first 6 weeks. So here's our time. It's got to be done no later than the end of the first 6 weeks. What they're going to do, is there proof of it? Can we measure it? Yes, we see that the marketing materials are available. And this might be something that you do as a district, that pretty much your comprehensive counseling program is going to, the basics of it are going to be the same for everybody, and the services available are going to be the same for everybody. So that might be something that's done at the district level. Okay, so that's how we dealt with our process data and the goals related to it. All right, so now we move into perception data. So I took what was on the whiteboard of each night and looked for some themes in it, and kind of align this. So at elementary level, well, elementary and middle school level, you see we have a really strong theme of social skills, respect. We've got respect and respect here. High school didn't really have that. So hopefully, I mean, in the ideal world, if we are really working on developing social skills and respect at the elementary and middle school years, they are in place in the high school, and we don't necessarily have to focus on them. We see pretty typical emotional regulation here uh, in elementary school. Again, same thing, that if we develop these skills and achieve these student outcomes at elementary, hopefully they're in place in middle school and high school, and we don't have to focus too much on it. We had a pretty strong theme for some in academic pride, and I'm kind of putting study skills in here, that if you have effective study skills, then you're going to feel good about your work. And we've got academic success skills here, academic pride here. So we've got that elementary and middle school. And then we also had a strong um, trend in parent education, parent involvement, that you can see that at all levels except the high school. The other interesting thing that came up was at the elementary and middle school level, we had issues with fairness and equity, and equal treatment for all students, gender equity. We had a really good discussion in one of the middle school groups that the perception of the teachers in that area um, was that was related to dress code. That it appears that girls get in trouble more for dress code violations than boys do. So you'd have to have some questions about uh, our dress code regulations uh, fair? Do we expect different things of girls than we do of boys? So if I were looking, and okay, so then our high school data talks about academic success skills. They were talking about time management, study skills, and then assistance with future planning, and that included course selection, goal setting, and future career choices. So the first thing that I would look at some things that go outside of the student area. So we've got a need here for parent education. So the first goal that I would say would be, counselors will develop a schedule for I don't know, time. It could be, depending upon on your other stuff, it could be monthly, um, bi-monthly. I'm going to leave that a little bit ambiguous. Um, Parent education sessions. Um, then within that, you could break that down based upon your campus need. Some of it could be things about helping your child plan for the future, assisting your students to increase academic success in the home, those types of things. So that could be a session, something like that. And then you would come down here and you would do your different activities. And your activities would identify the specific needs. And it may be that we don't have any parent information here. Nobody did a parent survey, which is understandable. You didn't have time to get that back. But you may want to survey your parents as to what are your needs? What would you like to see as far as parent education? And then that could be another goal. Counselors will conduct a parent survey related to parent education needs. And you need, by the end of the first 6 weeks. Okay, if you were doing this, you could do that by the end of the first 6 weeks. Now, the only thing about doing that is you're not kicking off. I mean, it may be that your first one is just like welcome to school, but that may delay you a little bit in getting your year started. The ideal situation would be that you do this in the late spring to plan for the next school year, so that during the summer you have time to get all that in place. The other thing that I see on this is the fairness and equity stuff. I think that calls for some teacher education, some, maybe just some discussion groups, a reading group, a book study of some sort. So I would look at maybe getting a little bit more information from students about what the fairness and equity issue is. But counselors will collaborate with teachers to identify and address student perceptions of fairness and inequity. Now, that really doesn't have a time in there, so you'd want to put a time with that. That one's not necessarily. It doesn't have the time specific thing in there, so you'd want to add that in. So when we look at some of these other things, we've got a pretty strong trend toward respect. So with that, I want to show you, I didn't realize that this was not in the document that I sent to you guys. These are the student competencies that go with the model. And part of the reason we had some problems formatting this for publication. This is the part of the model guide that I worked on a lot. I worked with Dr. Eunice Lerma of University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, and we developed this part of it. So these are the content areas for the model guide. So we've got intrapersonal effectiveness, interpersonal, post-secondary education and career readiness, and personal health and safety. So within that, we have student competencies. The student competencies are the same across the board, regardless of grade level. The goals are the same across the grade levels as well. So if we look at, let's go to interpersonal effectiveness and let's look for, I thought there was something in there about respect. I guess interact effectively with a diverse population. This could be, okay, no, that's not it. I thought there was something about respect. You could do effective and appropriate communication skills. You could do students recognize the personal boundaries, individual rights, and privacy needs of others. Here we go. Conflict resolution skills, healthy resolution. So you could pull from some of these here. Now, this is the overview of that. If you look over here in this, and this is what will be in the model guide. Where is my stuff? Okay, so by this, students will respect others and as individuals and accept them for their cultural membership. So you see that now we have grade level competency indicators. So primary, intermediate, middle school, and junior high. And this is where we break things out developmentally. Okay, so maybe we're going to work on this, students will respect others as individuals. So at the primary, it's going to be respect others as unique individuals, respect others' cultures by referring to their culture appropriately, analyze what respecting others as individuals means to them, and at the high school, evaluate how respecting others as individuals enhances interpersonal relationships. So we could do a broad level goal, and then you would come in from here to look at what would that mean at your developmental level, at your primary, intermediate, middle school, or high school. So when we go back over here, we've got issues with social skills and respect. So let's just write a student goal that's related to that. Students will increase, well, we have some issues with that because students will demonstrate respectful interactions with adults and peers. We would need some data you can say, 80% of the time or 85% of the time. So that would be your time limited piece of that. Now, if we had some discipline data, that if we could go to our discipline data and see that 90% of all office referrals are related to lack of respect for others. So then you could build that in there to say office referral rates for disrespectful behavior will decrease from 90% to 80% by the end of the first semester. That would be, let's just say that we have that data. Say office referrals for disrespectful behavior will decrease by 10% by the end of the third 6 weeks. That would be an example of a SMART goal for that. But I just made that data up. We don't have that data. So we would need to look at that too. So that could be other data. And if you're looking at that kind of data, that is outcome data that we would need to look at. So outcome data is going to include any type of, it's not perception, it's not process. So that can be your assessment, your like your TAPER report data, achievement data, that was the word I was looking for, discipline data, attendance data. Those would be examples of outcome data. So that's an example of district level goals. Okay, we haven't really addressed our high school stuff, and because that's, if we're looking at some of this, really this should start early on, and so these could be more campus specific as to what you're doing with that. But those would be some examples of district goals that we would look at. And if we're using outcome data for that, we would need to be looking at district-wide outcome data, not just campus data. So we would have to look across the board, but then you also could have your own outcome data on your own specific campus. So I hope that is helpful for you on how to write these goals and how to look for these trends and write it. So what you're going to do is you're going to write 3 campus goals. They can be related to your perception data from your needs assessment, or they can be related to your TAPER report, which is going to be your outcome data. Then we will use that data later. We'll use those goals later to continue to build your program. That as we move through, we'll start building the program and activities based upon the goals that you set. So your goals are going to be due next Friday. I've changed the date in the system, and you'll have that information that you need in the explanation for that activity. Okay, let me know if you have other questions.